Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Claire had always been seen as someone centered, firm in her decisions, a woman who inspired security wherever she went. People who saw her with Griffin said they made a stable couple, the kind that seems to have a silent agreement of loyalty and peace. They had known each other for almost 8 years, 5 of marriage, and built a life based on respect, dialogue, and promises of a shared future. But appearances don't always reflect what's going on inside. For months, Claire had been feeling pressured. The topic of motherhood, which once seemed distant, started surrounding her from all sides, friends getting pregnant, family members pushing, co-workers commenting. Inside her, a whirlwind. She couldn't explain why she was so afraid. It wasn't about childbirth or physical pain. It was about what came after. The idea of losing control of her own life, of erasing herself, of ceasing to be who she was to become just someone's mother. On one of those days when she felt particularly vulnerable, Claire ended up venting to Miles during an informal lunch. They had worked together for some time, had a certain professional affinity, but never had personal conversations. She just wanted to let off some steam. Miles, instead of minimizing or laughing, listened. He looked into her eyes and said he understood. That everyone carries their own fears and that motherhood, despite being something beautiful, also demands courage. His response was different from anything she was used to hearing. He didn't suggest she get over it, nor did he say it was natural to feel that way. He simply accepted her feelings. And at that moment, Claire felt seen. It was unexpected, and because of that, it shook her deeply. It was as if someone had lifted a stone off her chest, just with calm words. In the following days, the two crossed paths more often in the company hallways. There was something different in the way they greeted each other. Small exchanges of glances, long silences, a growing curiosity. Claire felt uneasy, and at the same time, alive. She still loved Griffin, but this connection with Miles awakened something in her that she didn't even know was dormant. What happened between them, when it happened, was quick. It was the end of the workday, both stayed late to review a report, and after a lame joke and an awkward silence, they stared at each other for too long. Miles approached. Claire hesitated. But she didn't pull back. It was as if everything they had been feeling became inevitable. There were no vows, no declarations. Just a moment of surrender that overflowed with everything that had been building up over the past few days. That night, Claire cried alone at home. She felt torn between the pleasure of what she had experienced and the remorse. She was in pieces, trying to understand how that had happened. And worst of all, as much as she wished to erase it, she had liked it. It was intense, different, something she had never experienced before, and that confused her more than anything else. She tried to go on with her life as if nothing had happened. She avoided Miles, responded coldly, dodged encounters at work. But inside, she carried the weight of guilt. Griffin continued to be gentle, and that made everything worse. The nights with him, the conversations at the dinner table, the travel plans, everything seemed like a reminder that she was hiding something devastating. It was then that her mother noticed something. During a casual visit, she commented that Claire seemed distant, burdened. And without pressing, simply suggested that sometimes holding on to certain truths can end up destroying more than freeing. Claire resisted. But at night, lying next to Griffin, staring at the ceiling, she thought about what her mother had said. And decided. The next morning, she asked to talk to him. Griffin found her serious tone strange, but sat on the couch without saying a word. Claire hesitated, bit her lips, clenched her hands. Then she took a deep breath and said she had made a mistake. That she had gotten involved with someone from work. And that she wasn't saying it to hurt him, but because she couldn't pretend anymore. She told him everything, with enough details to show regret, but also with modesty. She said she had felt vulnerable, confused. That she didn't plan it, that she didn't seek it, that it just happened. And that, above all, she was sorry. Griffin didn't say anything. He just stared. A hard look, as if he was trying to figure out whether it was a nightmare or reality. He got up, grabbed the car keys, and left. Claire stood frozen in the living room, unable to move. She knew that this was just the beginning of the fall. And there was no way to predict the extent of the impact that truth would still bring to both of them. Griffin left with a stiff body, a locked face, and hollow eyes, as if his soul had left first and left the body behind. He got into the car and drove aimlessly. His mind was spinning in circles, unable to focus on a single thought. He stopped in front of a cheap motel, went in, paid for a room, and stayed there, staring at the walls, trying to find meaning in what he had heard. He wanted to sleep, but couldn't. He wanted to scream, but his voice failed him. He wanted to understand why, after everything they had done together, Claire had chosen another man, another touch, another name. He spent hours in there. He didn't eat. He didn't call anyone. He just sat staring at the ceiling, as if waiting for some answer to drop out of nowhere. When the sun rose, he was still awake. His heart beat slower, but it still hurt. He returned home in the late afternoon, after spending the day driving without direction. Claire was in the same place where he had left her, as if time had refused to move forward for her as well. Her eyes were red, but dry. Griffin didn't say hi, didn't ask how she was, he just sat down and remained silent for a while, as if gathering the courage to dive into what still hurt. "He works with you?" he asked, in a low voice. Claire took a long time to respond. She seemed to measure each syllable before letting it out. "Yes." Griffin frowned, looked at the floor, and slightly shook his head. "Do you still see him every day?" "I try to avoid it." That answer cut him like a fine blade. It was honest, but cruel. So he went straight to what really tormented him. "What's his name?" Claire took a deep breath. Her hands trembled. She thought for a few seconds, and in the end, chose silence. Griffin waited. When he realized the answer wasn't coming, he let out a dry, bitter laugh. He got up without making a fuss, went to the bedroom, grabbed a change of clothes, and left again. Claire tried to follow him, but he made a discreet gesture asking her not to say anything. For Griffin, that silence screamed louder than any confession. He believed that if she were truly sorry, she would have said everything. The fact that she withheld the name, that she hesitated, led him to only one conclusion: Claire still wanted to protect the other man. And you only protect someone when there are still feelings. In the following days, she tried to reach out. She sent short messages, called without insisting, wrote an email saying she was willing to fight, that she didn't want to give up, that her silence was fear and not attachment. But for Griffin, it no longer made a difference. What he saw was a choice. And she chose to stay silent. The following week, he went to a law office. He asked them to handle everything discreetly and quickly. The lawyer asked if he wanted to try mediation, to talk to Claire before taking any action. He refused. He said he preferred to resolve everything with documents. Claire received the notice via email. She stared at the screen for a few minutes without reacting. It was as if she were being expelled from a life she herself helped build and destroy. This was worse than any shout, any argument. It was the end decided in silence. She called her mother, asked to spend a few days at her house. She was exhausted. When she arrived, she lay down and cried. Her mother tried to comfort her, but realized there was no room for advice. It was the pain of someone who had lost more than the love of a man. She lost trust, history, a home. Meanwhile, Griffin appeared calm. He worked normally, greeted colleagues, went out for lunch. But inside, there was a constant voice asking why. Why he hadn't been enough. Why she sought someone else. Why she didn't tell everything at once. A coworker, unaware of anything, commented that Griffin seemed more serious lately. He responded with a polite smile and said he had a lot on his mind with projects. It was a lie. The only project he had was surviving the day. Some nights, he woke up in the middle of the night and looked to the side expecting to see Claire there. But the bed remained empty. Other times, he passed by places they used to go together and felt his stomach turn. The wound was open, but he refused to touch it. The process continued. Claire's lawyer reached out, suggesting a personal conversation. Griffin refused. He preferred to handle it via email. She then wrote a final message: "If there is still any doubt about my feelings, I want to clarify that my earlier silence was out of fear, not love. I just wanted to spare you more pain. But I understand your choice. Forgive me for losing you." He read it, closed the laptop, and sat there motionless for hours. He didn't respond. Not that day, nor the following ones. It was the kind of pain that heals with time, but never returns to smooth skin. And he knew that. Because she took a part of him when she chose to lie by omission. And he took a part of her when he decided that silence was the final answer. Miles Dorsey had always been discreet. He was never the type of man who liked to expose himself or talk about his own life. He preferred to listen to others, help behind the scenes, do what was right, and keep his head down. When Claire appeared in his life for the first time, he didn't imagine that her insecure gaze hid an abyss similar to the one he himself carried. Long before Claire existed in his routine, Miles already knew the pain of being betrayed. His ex-wife, Lacey, confessed to an affair one late afternoon, shortly after returning from a trip that was supposed to rekindle their marriage. He reacted with coldness, without shouting. He asked her to pack her things and leave. The following week, he filed for divorce. No second chances, no long conversations. His justification was simple: he couldn't imagine sleeping next to someone who allowed another body into their shared story. The problem is that after the anger came the void. Lacey tried to talk weeks later, but he refused. A mutual friend tried to arrange a reunion. He ignored it. For a long time, he upheld the image that he had acted correctly, that preserving his dignity was more important than any reconciliation. But inside him, it turned into a sort of emotional labyrinth. It wasn't just pride. It was also fear. Fear of being weak, of seeming dependent, of admitting that part of him wanted, yes, to try again. Time passed, and Miles became more reserved. More serious. He was tired of promises and disappointments. When Claire appeared with her insecurities about motherhood, he saw a mirror. He also carried unhealed wounds. He knew what it was to be afraid of decisions that change everything. So he listened, advised carefully, trying not to invade her space. But he forgot to keep his distance from his own desire. The truth is that the involvement with Claire began before the touch. It started in the way he genuinely became interested in what she said. How he observed her silences. How he paid attention to the details that Griffin, perhaps out of habit or confidence, no longer noticed. Miles didn't think about seducing her. But he didn't step back either when he realized that she was crossing an invisible line between friendship and emotional intimacy. The day they were together stuck in his mind with details he could never erase. The way she looked at him, her breathing when they got closer, the shiver on her arm when he touched her hand for the first time. It was all quick, but intense. And after the pleasure came the guilt. A guilt that, for Miles, weighed even heavier because he knew exactly how Griffin would feel. He had been in that place. And still, he participated in the betrayal. In the following days, he realized the mistake. He wanted to turn back time. He wanted to pretend nothing had happened. When Claire talked about telling the truth, he tried to stop her. He said it would be better to keep it hidden to protect what was left. He thought that way he would be doing the right thing. But in truth, he was just repeating the cowardly behavior he criticized in Lacey when she chose to hide her affair for months. After Claire told Griffin everything and the divorce was initiated, Miles disappeared. He requested a department transfer. Stopped responding to messages. Quietly left all social groups involving coworkers. Deleted his social media. Started going straight home. Rejected invitations, avoided birthdays, ignored concerned messages. It was as if he was silently punishing himself. The nights grew long. He spent hours sitting in front of the TV, turned off. Opened bottles of wine more frequently than usual, but never enough to erase the guilt. He reread old conversations with Claire more than once, trying to understand where everything started to unravel. He tried to justify to himself that it was a human error, that he wasn't a monster. But the image of Griffin being betrayed the same way he was wouldn't leave his mind. He wrote letters he never sent. To Claire. To Griffin. To Lacey. He wrote, tore them up, wrote again. It was his way of trying to empty his chest. But nothing helped. He felt like he had poisoned whatever little piece he still carried. And the worst part was that he didn't know how to fix it. It was too late to go back, and moving forward seemed impossible. One afternoon, while walking through the neighborhood where he lived, he passed by a church and went in. He sat there for a while. Didn't pray. Just closed his eyes and tried to breathe without heaviness. For the first time in years, he cried. Cried in a way he didn't remember being possible. He cried for what he did, for what he lived, for what he lost. No one saw. No one knew. But that moment marked a breaking point inside him. He understood that part of his pain came from never facing his own mistakes head-on. He always blamed others. Always ran away. That night, he wrote a new letter. Not to apologize. But to finally acknowledge that he had hurt someone who never harmed him. And that, contrary to what he thought, carrying everything alone wasn't strength. It was running away. And no one heals by running forever. Miles was walking distractedly on the sidewalk when he spotted the bookstore's facade. He didn't plan to go in, but his feet moved before his mind decided. He wandered the aisles aimlessly, touching covers, reading scattered titles, almost as if looking for something without knowing what. He stopped in front of a shelf of essays and felt a familiar shiver run down his spine. A voice, low and sweet, asked permission behind him. He turned around, and there was Lacey. She held 2 books in her hand, hair loose, serene expression. For a moment, Miles felt time rewind. But the woman in front of him was no longer the same. He wasn't either. She smiled lightly. The kind of smile that doesn't demand explanations. Just acknowledges. They exchanged simple words. How have you been? Are you living around here? And work? When he responded, his voice came out steady, but inside everything seemed trembling. Lacey suggested coffee. He agreed with a nod. They sat in silence for a few minutes, and when she asked if he was okay, Miles broke down. He talked about Claire. About the mistake. About how he got involved unintentionally, but allowed everything to happen. He confessed that he tried to convince Claire to hide what they did, arguing it would prevent more pain, but deep down he knew he wanted to protect himself from a responsibility that seemed too heavy. She listened without interrupting, as he never listened to her years ago. When he finished, she crossed her arms and took a deep breath. She said she always wanted that conversation, but no longer expected it. She told him that, during the betrayal, she felt alone in the marriage. That she tried to show signs, provoke reactions, but Miles was always distant, more focused on appearing strong than being present. She said she sought someone outside because she felt she was slowly disappearing inside the house. Those words hit him harder than any insult. For the first time, he understood that not every mistake is born from malice. Sometimes, it's born from neglect that goes unnoticed. And even though it didn't justify what Lacey did, he finally saw his part in the story. The coldness, the silence, the way he pushed her away without realizing it. He thought he was punishing Lacey when he ignored her, when he refused to hear any explanation. But in truth, he was running from his own guilt. The conversation with Lacey broke an old armor. He returned home changed. And that night, instead of running from his own thoughts, he sat down and wrote. The letter he would send to Griffin was ready in 2 hours. He said everything. Admitted he participated in destroying Griffin's marriage, that he tried to justify it with empty advice, and that he regretted it. He didn't ask for a response. Nor forgiveness. He just wanted to unload that burden from himself. He placed the letter in an envelope and left it on the table. He didn't send it. But the mere act of writing it brought relief. Months passed since the divorce. Claire rebuilt her routine between deep silences and tasks that filled time, but not the emptiness. One of those days, while organizing old papers, she felt a sudden nausea. At first, she thought it was nerves, or exhaustion. But the days passed and her body kept giving signals. She bought a pharmacy test with a trembling hand. The result came quickly, positive. She sat on the floor, holding the test, unsure if she should cry from fear or relief. Her thoughts immediately went to one night. The last she had with Griffin, days before the confession. They were distant, but her body sought comfort. It was a brief moment, full of silence and urgency, as if something inside her knew it would be the last time. And now, that night had left a permanent mark. For 2 days, Claire tried to decide what to do. She thought about going it alone. Thought about telling him everything. Wrote a message, deleted it. Dialed, hung up. On the 3rd day, she gathered the courage and showed up at his workplace. Asked to speak with him. Griffin agreed, suspicious. They sat on a nearby bench. She took a deep breath and got straight to the point. Said she was pregnant. That she had done the math. And that everything indicated he was the father. Griffin fell silent. He ran his hand over his face, looked around, and didn't say anything for a while. He was stunned. The information felt too heavy to digest right there, suddenly. Claire tried to explain that she didn't mean to confuse him, nor cause more pain. But she felt he had the right to know. He only thanked her for telling him and left. Claire watched him walk away without saying if he believed her, without asking anything more, without giving any indication that he would contact her again. The pain of seeing him disappear once more was worse than all the other farewells they had lived through. During the pregnancy, she had no news from him. She had strange cravings, anxiety attacks, sleepless nights, and faced everything with a strength she didn't even know she had. With each ultrasound, she imagined Griffin sitting next to her, listening to the sound of their daughter's heartbeat. But the chair beside her remained empty. Eden was born on a late afternoon. Claire cried when she held her in her arms. She cried for the love that exploded for that tiny life and for everything missing around her. She registered the baby with her own last name. She returned home with a mix of fullness and sadness. 4 weeks after Eden's birth, Griffin showed up at her door. His eyes were sunken, his beard unshaven. He said he had thought a lot. That he was confused. That he spent sleepless nights. But he needed to know. He asked to do a DNA test. Claire handed Eden to him. He looked at her for a long time. Then, he agreed to take the test. 2 weeks later, the results came. Positive. Eden was his daughter. Griffin locked himself in the car for almost an hour with the envelope in his hand. He didn't know what he felt. It was joy, fear, guilt, regret, all at the same time. Afterwards, he sent Claire a short message, "Can we talk?" During the conversation, there was no drama. Just 2 adults trying to figure out what to do with a new life that already connected them forever. He said he needed time, but wanted to be present. He started coming once a week. Brought diapers, took care of Eden while Claire rested, learned to hold the baby the right way. Over time, the visits became more frequent. Eden smiled when she saw him. Claire smiled watching them together, even trying to hide it. The relationship between the two shifted from formal to light. They started talking about other things. Laughed together over silly things. Shared difficult nights and small victories. Griffin began to realize that what he felt for Claire still existed. But it wasn't the same love from the past. It was deeper. More human. A love that understood mistakes, that accepted scars. Claire also started to lower her guard. She allowed herself to dream again about a shared life. But she would only say it when she was sure Griffin was ready. On Eden's first birthday, he arrived before the party. Helped set everything up, held the baby in his arms while Claire lit the candle. When she blew it out, he whispered something only Claire heard. "I want to come back home." She slowly turned. Her look said everything before the words. There were no promises. There was presence. And she accepted. They came back slowly. Like someone carefully gluing a cracked vase, knowing the marks would remain, but that didn't stop it from having value. Today, they tell Eden's story with pride. Not for what they did right, but for everything they learned from what they did wrong. Because sometimes, life takes such big turns that only those with the courage to keep walking without seeing the path can understand. And when forgiveness arrives, it doesn't erase the past, but builds a future where mistakes become steps, not condemnations. Suspicious of your wife or daughter-in-law? Don't go through what we saw in the video. Check the link in the comments and get the ebook with valuable tips and investigator-approved sites to clear your doubts. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.